Welcome to the Hi-Fi of Customer Experience, podcast brought to you by cxmlab.com. It will be a short, sharp and interactive podcast with some of the best minds in the business, and we will take 5 key questions. CXM Lab is a platform to express thoughts, ideas and tools that drive customer experience and will enable marketers, CIOs, CTOs and CDOs to think, reflect and make the right choices for their brands and organizations. For more insights, you can log on to cxmlab.com. Our guest today is Maneesh Sharma, Country Head, Github India. One of the world's leading development platform, Github has expanded its operations into India for, I think, more than a year now, signaling the Microsoft-owned company's intention to broaden its appeals amongst developers across India. The new subsidiary, GitHub India, targets the San Francisco-based company's third largest group of active developers after the US and China in the Indian market. A technologist with more than 20 years of experience of conceptualizing, building, marketing, selling, and supporting technology products. Manish enjoys working on strategic and operational roles across functions, and he's had a great innings in the past with Sun, Adobe, SAP, to just name a few, besides a few startups of his own. Thank you, Manish, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Neeraj. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for the kind introduction. Hello, everybody.
Manish, you had an interesting journey as a technologist. You had a long innings at SUN Microsystems, SAP, and then at IQ.com, the world's largest online learning delivery platform, followed by Adobe, and now leading GitHub in India. Do share your thoughts on how the technology landscape has evolved in India.
Oh, wow, that's a interesting question. I think the technology landscape is something that changes almost every day. I think all the speakers and you would agree. But if you really look at it, it has fundamentally shifted over the last 15 years. Back when I was in college, and I won't let you guess my age, but it was definitely last century. For me to be in the computer lab and use tools like Archie, Gopher to get information was a very interesting concept. For even a developer like me at that point in time, getting access to the world's resources was not easy.
Yeah.
I think with internet coming in after that and the explosion in access to information, it has really driven the pace of innovation.
Yeah.
And I can give you a few examples. You talked about me being in Sun, and I remember for us to do proof of concepts for a product company in India to run on a Solaris machine, you had to ship the machine to their office. And I still remember back in the day, we had issues like octroi, customs duty, because we had to get the server in India, we had to ship it to an office. And you know how shipping a server within Mumbai or sending it even to Thane would be difficult. So that was the limitation of somebody wanting to build something. I think now what is happening with cloud, while it is a very, very popular topic, but if I really break it down, it's actually giving access to unlimited resources for people to innovate. I think that is what is driving innovation. So there might be somebody who's just gotten out of college. They don't need a huge investment to build on an idea that they would have got.
Yeah.
They can immediately start doing it. And the same is true for enterprises as well. Right? Enterprises don't need to plan for large budget cycles, wait for the next financial year to kick off huge projects. Right? You'd remember that. I'm sure CIOs who are part of your podcast would remember, going in for planning cycles for long 2-3 year running projects.
Absolutely.
They can now do 1 month project, try out something. If it works, scale it and scale it down. So that is what is really driving the pace of innovation. And that's across industries, it's across segments. Yeah. From a consumer perspective, right? I think mobile has also been talked a lot, but that is what is driving the innovation on the back. So the back end on the cloud is where innovation is being developed. The consumption, whether it is B2C or B2B, the mobile experience is actually driving the need for more and more engagement with these platforms. Right? So you're seeing every day people coming up with new applications, new models, new products that users can use. And we've come a long way from a service-oriented industry. Back in the late 90s, when companies were very few. We're seeing an explosion in the B2B SaaS space as well. So the youth in India are starting to build digital companies, they're going to build products, and really truly making India a digital nation. Exciting times.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Manish, what are the biggest challenges and opportunities in India that the GitHub team deals with in serving these large open source communities?
I think India is a fantastic market. I'm a super patriot, by the way. I love what's happening in India. If you look at the stats, India would be the largest developer market in the world by 2023.
Yeah.
And we don't need the stats. We just need to step outside our home to look around. Right? The youth is embracing technology. There are more students going into computer science than ever before. There are companies going digital. So there's just an explosion that's happening. I think for the way I look at it for GitHub, it's about how do we serve this entire developer population, right? And serving this developer population means different things. One is, getting them plugged into what is the developer community globally, because software development is a team sport. Right? Just like open source, you don't have a single developer building software on its own. They're actually connected to the global developer community. So how do we bring whatever is happening in the global developer community to developers in India is one definite goal that we have. But at the same time, celebrate the success of India and build that culture of open source software development. I think open source as a concept has been there in India for a very long time now. Yeah. But the point has come where we will start to create and nurture open source projects from India. So I am really, really passionate about going out into the globe and talking about, hey, there are 30 projects from India which talk about solving a problem, but also solving the problem at scale. Because I think problems in India are all about scale. And these open source projects can then be picked up by a lot of the emerging economies, whether it's Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia. And that would be the contribution of the open source community from India. So, in short, what we're looking at is how do we support the developer ecosystem, whether they're a student, whether they're in a startup, whether they're in an enterprise, it's a developer ecosystem, and support them at scale.
Yep. I think very, very valid point you made, and you hit the nail on the head when you said support at scale. So how is GitHub driving, say, innovation at scale, collaboration at scale, and providing a great developer experience in India? We are proponents of customer experience. For you, what's the developer experience like in India for GitHub users?
I think developer experience is super, super important, because we have to innovate for a developer who's actually innovating for the world, right? They're building the next biggest thing. Yeah. So if you think about it, GitHub was started with a very simple idea that how do we get developers to collaborate in building software, right? About 13 years back, that was a very simple idea, but it has really, really exploded with open source coming on board. Enterprise also realizing that, one, they're consuming a lot of open source themselves, where they need to be plugged into that ecosystem. And they want the same level of collaboration, sharing, reuse within their organization as well. So the whole concept of inner sourcing has also become very important. What we do every day when we wake up is to think about how do we make the life of a developer easy? Because in the back end, right, while there is cloud, mobile technologies, right, there are lots of things that the engineering team for a software company does, right? And I'm sure with Neeraj, you working with a lot of customers, even when they're looking at digital, there is a whole army of digital people in the backend who are building user interfaces, who are connecting the dots. So how do we take away a lot of the administrative work that a developer would do so that they spend more time on innovation? And there are many aspects to this. One is the whole experience of how quickly they can start building applications. If we have the comfort of the cloud available, you don't need to set up the whole development environment in your laptop or in your servers. You should be able to spin up machines in the cloud in an instant, right? And all of that should be pre-configured and easy to do. You don't have to spend time in doing that. You should spend time in building the algorithm that you really thought about as being unique. So that's very important. The other part of experience is also security. Yeah. I think right now security is important. It has always been important. But with everything becoming digital, how do you embed security in the products that you're developing? So we're actually shifting the whole conversation left, where when a software developer is building applications, you are sort of securing the software there itself. So all of these things in making sure the life of that developer is easy to innovate is the focus that we have.
Absolutely. Fantastic. The organizations that are most effectively speeding up business transformations or digital transformations are those who have turned to open source software development to succeed in a fast changing digital environment. Which are some of the success stories that you can share with us that you probably have witnessed in the recent last year or last couple of years?
I think on the open source topic, we can actually make a few statements. Right? A couple of decades ago, there was always the question of what is open source, whether it's relevant or not. Then we had the whole space of using open source products to run your applications, right? Whether it's a web server, an application server, or a mail server, etc. But I think what has really happened, going back to the first question that you had, Neeraj, right? What's driving innovation? I would say that open source is what is driving innovation. Now, every software project that is being written anywhere in the world is using open source. Right?
Yes.
You might be importing a library, you might be reusing code, but they're all using open source. So open source is here to stay. I like to call it open source is dark matter. It's there. It's in everything. Even in this call that we're doing, I'm sure there's open source components being used in the backend. What is interesting is the whole concept of reuse. And that's the most important part. And it's not only the last 1 year, I think that's happening all around us. And it's happening in all the companies that are becoming digital as well. It's like making a new car. So you don't go redesign how a wheel should be. You don't redesign how an axle should be or a steering wheel, right? All of these things, these are standards. These are available in the open ecosystem that you can reuse. What you do is you take these components and you build your secret sauce on top of it to differentiate yourself. And all digital companies in India, whether you're born digital like all these startups, or even traditional industries, right? Whether it's a bank or a telecom player, as they're moving into digital, they're using a lot of open source to accelerate it. If open source didn't exist, everybody would be starting from scratch, and that pace of innovation will sort of reach to a halt. So I would say that every organization, anybody who's doing digital projects today is actually on the bedrock of open source. And it again goes back to your previous question, right? How do we build that consciousness within developers that it's not only about consuming open source, the entire ecosystem, the economy, the developer world will thrive when you contribute back. So how do you build that culture in India of contributing back to open source is what we're starting to work with. And industry plays a very, very important role. As I just, in my long monologue, I talked about how all of these companies are using open source. I think it's part of their responsibility to start supporting open source as well. Right? And that could mean start supporting open source projects in India.
Do you see that happening in India? Do you see that already happening?
Yeah. I do see it. It's also the shift that's happening in the developer world. So all the new age developers are very comfortable using open source. Right? So as you just said, we have the third developer community in the world in India on GitHub, and it's going to become number one. All of these new age developers are already working on open source, and they're going and working in these enterprises. So they're bringing that culture that, hey, we need to do it. There's still a long way to go, but the industry is starting to realize it. And I think that's part of my goal to bring all of this together, the developer ecosystem, the academia, as well as industry, so that they all work together to sort of make the ecosystem thrive. One statement which I can end your question with is every company in the world is becoming a software company. It doesn't matter what you do, right? You might be selling or making matchsticks, but you will have software that is going to be running your business. And that change has already started to happen. So if everything is becoming digital, it's going to be bits and bytes and software, and open source is going to be a significant part of what you're doing, I think these connects with the ecosystem become very, very important.
Absolutely. Very well put, Manish. Manish, you kind of over the last year or 18 months, you've introduced various products like the GitHub code spaces, the GitHub discussions, the GitHub private instances. Maybe there are some more products in the pipeline or already out there. Tell us something more about there and how are they likely to impact the developer community and what is it in it for from an organization's point of view?
I think this goes back to what we discussed a little while back, making the life of the developer super easy so that they can innovate and push forward human progress is our vision and mission. That's what we do. All of the products, all of the features that we work on is towards that goal. So let me talk about code spaces, which is a very exciting concept. So let's take open source for now. If I am an open source contributor or a maintainer and working on a project, I will actually need to get that code. I will need to configure my system exactly the way it is required to build and run that code with that exact library, the security frameworks, right, the servers, connections, etc. And at scale, this becomes very difficult. And you need to test and deploy pretty quickly. So the whole CI/CD framework is, how do you innovate quickly? And that's an important part of innovation as well. You don't wait for 1 year to release a feature. You're actually doing it almost every day. When all of us wake up in the morning, look at our mobile phones, there would be 10 apps that have been updated overnight. There's a lot of work that developers are doing at the back end.
Yeah.
And code spaces is one step towards making sure that all of these developers get a virtual environment in the cloud to build software. So you have your IDE, which you use to code in your browser that you can use, and you have your entire environment for your project being spun up in the cloud. And that's really about scale. So as innovation progresses, Neeraj, there's going to be more and more applications being built.
Yeah.
A recent Forrester report was that there are going to be about 500 million applications that are going to be written in the next 5 years. That's more than what has been written ever. And that just goes to show how this whole development environment needs to become scalable and easy as well. So code spaces is towards that. Discussions is basically because software development is the world's largest team sport. And I'm sure in your organization as well, you have teams, you have squads, right? You have agile working teams working with other teams. So there's always these collaborations that happen within developers and different teams. And they're given that everybody is distributed, it's not only about the pandemic where we are forced to be distributed, but the normal actually is going to be a distributed workforce, a distributed collaborative team. So if you want to collaborate with them, if you want to discuss topics, right, there are these features that will help and facilitate these discussions. So I think all the features that we are developing and releasing is towards making that life of developer easy to innovate. And one of the most important things that we're doing at the core of all of this is security.
Yes.
So because you don't need to always have worry on your mind that, hey, what will happen?
Yeah.
So we should automate a lot of these things. We should support the developer that, hey, this is happening there, or this bug has been fixed in that library, which you're using another library. You should upgrade it, or maybe do it automatically by checking the code that it does not break when we're making these updates. All of this information is what's going to really drive innovation. And it's back to that same fundamental, which I keep repeating, is making the life of that developer really, really easy.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Manish. Manish, one last question, and this is not about technology. This is about people. This is about culture. And I've known you for some time, and as a leader, how do you deal with people in an organization, and how do you build a culture of trust? How do you build a culture of collaboration? How do you build a culture of where people feel self-motivated to be a part of a vision or a mission that the organization wants to pursue? I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. I really admire some of the ways in which you manage your leadership style. So I'd like to hear some thoughts from you on this.
I think these are, I would say, my own trials and tribulations, Neeraj. my experiences of having failed in many things in my life to figure out a few things that work. I think at the core of everything is transparency. So if you're transparent with everybody and you're making decisions and explaining your thought process to everybody so that they understand what's going on, I think that's the first step, which actually brings everybody together. So there is no thought at the back of anybody's head, hey, why is this decision being made, or why is the organization moving this way, or why is the team behaving like this? It's sort of like it becomes a collective thing. And having the empathy and trust among the entire team is super important, because then everybody is emotionally vested in everybody else's success. So it's not about the individual, it's about the team. So it all comes together. But for me personally, I think what really works is, you know, it might sound cliched, but leading and showing by example. So I like to be in the trenches with the team, with whatever I do, so that I can not only show them sometimes how it needs to be done, if it's the first time they're doing something, but it also shows that I'm shoulder to shoulder with them. Right? So it's, if they're making experiments, if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. I'm with them, and that fear gets taken away from the entire team. That, hey, should I take this decision? Should I do this or not? And it's not only about tech innovation, it is about people and the organization as well. We need to keep pace with everything. So while technology is never going to stop, right? If the behavior of the team and the organization culture also doesn't keep pace, I think the equation doesn't balance itself.
Absolutely.
No silver bullet, no golden rule. I think these are experiences of every day.
Yes, yes, Manish. Thank you very much. I wish you the very best in your innings at GitHub. I think you're doing a fabulous job over the last 12 to 18 months. Really looking forward to a lot more coming from GitHub. And best wishes to you, Manish. Thank you for talking to us, and thank
Thank
you
you,
for sharing your
Neeraj.
experiences.
It was a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to share my thoughts.